Hello everyone! With Set 7 release, we got to do updated deck profiles. This time on the one that I'm very excited for and been waiting for so long, ever since how many years? It's a new upgrade to Bavsargra. And I have to say I'm very happy with the result with the new Bavsargra because we got new weapons and basically few little tweaks that are actually huge for the deck. And it's one of those forms that I've been waiting for so long that I'm just very excited to do this. But anyway, how does the deck function? Pretty much the same as the original, where you're basically equipping weapons to it, like it's maximum summon in Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Legion if you want to talk about it that way, where you just connect the cards together on a specific side, and then those weapons are going to have their own extra abilities to add to Bavsargra. So that's basically its playstyle. It's very simple as that, and it's still the only deck that still does something like this, along with another specific deck from a manga pro tag. But other than that, not many decks do the weapon playstyle where you put multiple cards on the Vanguard, which is why I really like this deck, and also Dragon Waifu. But anyway, let's begin with the deck profile, with of course, the Ride deck. Starting off with the new Aksayya, you have to run this one for the new Ride line, in which we go to Narmancar, which is very similar to the original, except that you need a Soul Blast to new grade 0, so you could search for one of your new weapons, which is the new sword or the new shield. But if you went second, aka if your opponent's at least grade 1 when you ride this, you search for both weapons instead, which is actually very huge. With the second skill, where when it attacks while your Vanguard is fully armed, this card gets us 5k power, which will come up sometimes because Bavsargra still does the superior calling like the original. You're going to be soul blasting this sometimes and then do call it. But anyway, going on to the grade 2 with Halibadra. So Halibadra, unlike the original, this one does not do anything on ride, and does still get 5k power if your Vanguard is fully armed. But if a Bavsargra, the new one, rides on top of it, you can counterblast one to search your deck for 2 different arm cards and put it to the drop. And after that, you arm one of them to your Vanguard, which is of course very huge because this is superior arming, meaning that you already have one armed already equipped to your Vanguard, meaning you just need one more for full power. So this itself is already huge, except it only works with the new Bavsargra, so you still use the old one. Unfortunate, but not like you will use the old one unless if you're on a budget, because this deck is not budget friendly. In which we go to Bavsargra Aksayya, which has basically the same skills as the original, except with a few tweaks. But first, it is treated as the original Bavsargra. This is huge because now you can use its old weapons, and I really like this because now old support is relevant. Ignoring the second part for a moment, we're going to go to the third part of the skill, where it's basically the same as the original, where you can Soul Blast 2 if it's fully armed to nuke your opponent's front row, and crit +1. But if you're unable to nuke anything at all, you draw a card. That little tiny part where you draw a card was not part of the original. That is pretty huge because now you just have a reason to basically give it a crit pressure and also an extra draw on top of it if you cannot retire. Especially with the amount of decks that can remove their rear guards beforehand, this is huge. And then the third skill, where when it gets armed, you energy charge 1 instead of the original soul charge 1, and then you superior call a grade 1 or less unit from your drop zone. But you can also perform an overdress if you have the requirements. That is huge because the original one did not have the ability to overdress on top of one of your units, aka it's going to be your Trick Moon, your main grade 0, or her partner. Even though it's a small tweak, that is just very helpful, especially makes it easier for some crazy shenanigans. But the new added skill, once per turn, you can put a card from your hand to soul. This is going to be your way to get the soul now, and then choose an arm card from your drop zone and arm it. Yep, you got your own way to superior arm itself as well. Not only that you can do a normal arm, you also do a superior arm with this card, meaning that you'll be fully armed in your first grade 3 ride. And thanks to Halibadra, that's another superior arm, especially now with the new arms that could just constantly stack. This little small tweak of an added skill makes this very huge that it's just so self-sustainable, it's just so good. So yeah, this is just a huge improvement just because of that. And now continuing on to the main deck, we of course still run 3 for the Persona ride. And then we go to our new arms. So first off, we start off with 2 copies of our new sword. Which you play by counterblasting 1, and of course you put it on the right side of Bavsargra. And when this card is placed on your Bavsargra, choose one of your Vanguards, it gets this skill in the end turn. Plus 5k power to your whole front row. Yes, it's smaller than the original sword where it's only Bavsargra itself gets plus 10k on attack, but this ability can stack, and you're giving it to the whole entire front row instead of just itself. That is pretty huge, especially with the multi-arming that you can do. You got the superior arming on top of it, which is of course going to make it even stronger. But the second skill is that when your Vanguard attacks, and if your opponent's Vanguard at least grade 3, this card gets drive +1 into the end of the battle, and then at the end of the battle, put this card to the drop zone. Yep, that's extra drive checks right here for one attack. And yes, if you stack it with the gun, you can do 4 drive checks, but you're not going to do that because that's 2 counter blasts, while this one's free. Already a huge improvement for a sword. But you mainly use this not just for the drive check, but for the extra stacking power, especially the amount of times that you can actually rearm. Hence why you run 2 copies. I might bump it up to 3 just to make it easier to find. But due to the fact that this is just easily searchable, 2 is enough. And then to the new shield, which you play by counterblasting 1. So the added new skill is literally when it's placed, you draw a card. Just having that is already huge because it's drawing cards, and the original shield did not have that skill. But the second part is that you get the 10k shield for free, but you can also additional soul blast to make it 20k instead. Yeah, that's kind of huge because that's a new added section that the original shield of course doesn't have, so it just makes it better by default. And with these 2 new weapons, it just makes the deck even better because extra shield value and extra offense. And now to some of the old weapons. So I run the old mace or hammer. So of course it's put on the right side, and you can still play it just because it's still treated as the original Bavsargra because you have to arm it to the sealed blades made in Bavsargra. So this one lets you retire one of your opponent's back or rear guards, and you can play for free. Hence why I still play 1. It's still very helpful because of that. With the other part where at the end of the turn you can retire it to choose a right arm card from a drop zone and put it back to your hand. It's helpful if you need it, but you mainly need it for the back row retire because sometimes there are annoying pests in the back row. In which finally, 2 axe, because this is not searchable and you'll sometimes want it because this one gives the battle door effect. And then at the end phase, you can counterblast 1, retire to arm a left arm card to Bavsargra. It's just extra helpful for the offensive play, but you do kind of want to run 2 copies just so you can see it much easier, but there are ways to search, but not as easy. And now to the new grade 2, Yumashad. This is the main new grade 2 of the deck, because on place from hand, and your Vanguard is a sealed blaze, you can energy blast 3 to discard 1 arm card, draw 2 cards, and plus 5k. That itself is already pretty good. It's just extra draw power, but it is a little restricted on how you can draw. But the actual important part is the second skill, because at the end of the battle that your Vanguard attacks, you can counterblast 1 and stand this unit. Yes, Bavsargra finally gets its own multi-attacker. It's no longer a 3-attack deck because of this. Not only that, extra draw power is always pretty nice. And of course, giving it some extra power with that skill is also pretty nice, but itself is kind of low power. But thanks to other support, like the sword, it's going to help out with the extra power problem that this card kind of has. So combining it with that, it just makes this extra restanding pretty good. But you mainly run it because it's a restanding rearguard. And then next up, Apora. So Apora, when placed on rearguard from hand, look at top 5 cards of your deck to put 1 arm card or 1 dress boost unit and put it to the drop zone. This is of course pretty helpful because you're going to be able to arm in the drop zone, so essentially it's a search, which is always nice. But the second skill is also very helpful because when your Vanguard is equipped, you can energy blast 3 to call this to rearguard. Considering the amount of arm cards that you have to run, or sometimes that you do not have big units on your rearguard, having the ability to just superior call from the drop zone is always nice. You can run Shihab instead if you wish, but Shihab costs counterblast, and this one uses energy, but this one has the ability to search, so I think this one's a little nicer. And then finally, Devista. This one last thought, you can run whatever you want, but this is just additional searching where you can, on place, Soul Blast 1, look at top 7. For 2 cards that are either arm or dress boost, 1 goes to drop and 1 goes to hand. It's just further searching if you need it, and it's also a big attacker on its own because the second skill is that when this card attacks at least a grade 3 unit, if your Vanguard is fully armed, plus 10k, hence why the end phase sword retire matters because that timing, it makes a huge difference. But this can be any slot that you wish. I just run this one because I think this is just helpful sometimes, so I just prefer it. And with the grade 2s done, let's get on to the main grade 0 before heading to the grade 1. So first off, we start off with Trick Moon. Trick Moon is the partner grade 0 for the deck, so you have to run 4. When put behind the Vanguard, you countercharge 1, which is still kind of sucks that it has to be behind the Vanguard, but the extra countercharge does help. And by default, you will do it on the first arm just because of Bavsargra, costing a counterblast. But the second skill is the Dress Boost ability. So when this card boosts, the boosted unit gets plus 10k power for each arm card on your Vanguard. Yep, that's an extra huge boosting of plus 20k power. And that itself is already pretty nasty, and this used to be the main booster of the deck. But of course, this one you have to really search because you can't really, since this one can't be searched from ride line, so you do need that extra support to search this. And running 4 just makes it easier to see. And also with the new overdress skill on Bavsargra, it just makes this of auto 4-up because it's just helpful with the overdress on top of this. In which we now overdress to Trick Moon to Vailord, which is the evolved form of Trick Moon, and thanks to the new Bavsargra, it makes it into a 4-up. Unless the ban list hits this to 1, then you're just going to need to run 3 different new cards in place of the 3 Vailords. But anyway, it cannot be chosen by opponent's card ability, and when placed by overdressing, you can counterblast 1, choose 2 arm cards from your drop zone, 1 goes to soul, and 1 gets equipped to your Vanguard. That is very helpful because that's extra soul, which is going to be helpful for the cost, and rearming, which can trigger more skills. In which the second skill is that on Dress Boost, on Overdress State, your whole front row gets plus 5k power for every arm card. Yes, it's weaker than the original Trick Moon boost, but you give it to the whole front row. And now with the superior Overdress, you can do a triple Dress Boost, and then give it plus 30k to the front row, making it even better because of the restanding rearguard. So one thing you can do is this boost Yumashad plus 10k, boost the other Yumashad plus another 10k, boost the Vanguard plus another 10k. That's 30k power buff right there with a restanding Yumashad, which is what makes this card absurdly insane because that extra power combo with the Yumashad is actually what makes this card really good as a 4-of and also makes Yumashad very good. Hence why you just must run 4 because you just want to see this as soon as you can. And then next up, you can run whatever grade ones you wish, but first off, I run the Cindy. So when your Trick Moon is placed and you do not have another copy of itself, you can call this from the drop zone, which is of course very helpful because it's just more free calling and sometimes you will need a board. So this having the ability to call itself is just always nice. But the other skill is also very helpful because you can put it to soul, which is very helpful itself already, and choose an arm card or a overdress ability card from your drop zone and put it to your hand. Just helpful for extra resources of recycling, and the soul itself is already for free, which you can always soul blast it out and then re-superior call this if you wish. So this card is just worth running, but you just don't really need it as much, especially with all the extra stuff, especially with your board kind of filled up with other stuff already, but sometimes it is there if you need it. And then finally, for the last grade one, which you can run whatever you want, is the Shenri, because once again, it goes to soul pretty much for free, but it's for boosting and you draw a card. And you can always reoccur this by soul blasting it and then recalling it. So it's up to you on whatever you want to run, but since this is not a budget friendly deck, you might just make this card very expensive as possible. And then finally, 4 PGs, 1 cent to 2 on it. And then we go to the trigger lineup. OT, restanding is always great. 8 crits for full on pressure. 3 fronts because you have a lot of draw power technically now, and of course you don't want to deck yourself out, so just even more power to the front row is just nice. You could run soul fronts instead, but at the moment I kind of prefer the extra shield, while also at the same time there isn't that much soul problems either for the deck, so that's the reason why I prefer this one. Now if you are facing a bit of that, then yeah, soul fronts it is. And then finally 4 heals, 2 being counters. And so that's it for this deck profile on my new Bavsargra Aksayya deck. What do you guys think of it? What other cards would you recommend and what other changes would you make? So far, I've been liking the deck as it is. I might change up a few ratios and maybe take some out just because there might be other cards that might be a little better and there are a few cards I still want to kind of test out. But overall, I really like the deck. It's a Bavsargra that I've been asking for, basically a evolve form upgrade. Basically an upgrade that has been awaited for a long time ever since set 4 of Overdress. And here we are with a new form after 3 to 4 years. And I have to say, with those small little tweaks is already pretty huge to make it self-sustainable. But what's even much more nice is, of course, new weapons to go along with it. And one thing I was originally worried about is that new form means new name, so meaning old weapons won't work. But since they put the part where it's treated as original, old weapons and support still works, which is actually really nice, which is actually very nice because I do still like some of the old weapons. And I'm glad that they still let you use the old weapons overall. But speaking of weapons, the new weapons are also very good. It actually makes Bavsargra even better because that's actually what's the main part of Bavsargra, because herself isn't that great without her weapons. It's her weapons that basically give her additional skills that make her crazy. But what's even better is now we got a restanding rearguard, meaning that this deck is no longer 3 attacks. It's now able to do 4 to 5 attacks, which is already huge, especially since with a card that can boost the whole entire front row, which did get hit in Japan because of it. So if the Vailord ever gets hit, 3 cards are going to be in place for the Vailord replacements. But other than that, there's really not much to say here, other than it's just a crazy strong deck that is now sustainable and it's now budget friendly. But because I had this from the beginning, this deck is just very playable for me because I already had the deck when it was still cheap. But other than that, that's for this, and see you next time.